And now I shall put on my preacher role, whatever. Hi, my name is Kipp. He, him pronouns. I am the associate pastor here, and I am so glad to be with you this morning. And my mood is a lot lighter than it was the first time I wrote my sermon. But I would like to begin the day with a first reading from a poet by the name of Nate Marshall. He's a Black poet who grew up in Chicago, and so Chicago informs what he does, though he lives in Colorado, where he teaches now. I love his voice. This is from a new collection. And this poem, it speaks both to the realities that he lives with, and to his conviction that he will celebrate in the midst of all of the realities. This is called Obad, and Obad is a poem for the morning. So this is Obad for the Whole Hood. Obad for the Whole Hood by Nate Marshall. Today I offer myself all the small kindnesses. I'm out here with breath in my body, though it may be stank, and body in my control, though it may be too much or not enough. Today, I offer the whole crib a jam we ain't heard in a minute, and permission to turn the news down and move a hip like a suggestion to a lover. On this day, I declare the pockmarked street I grew up on a miracle. I declare the bills, even the overdue ones, a blessing. Who knew that we would still be here to see these injustices? How can we measure the disrespect of lack against that precious surprise? Real talk. Today I tell myself truths other than the one that makes me low. I give myself the gift of a joke with the homies. Real talk. Today I stay woke to all the terror, but also to my favorite food, or my favorite place, or my best hope for our people, and I work to make all my best lives possible. The assigned Bible reading for this morning comes from the book of Joshua. This is the book that kind of brings an end to the wanderings of the desert and sets up the Hebrew people as a nation. This is from the very last chapter of Joshua, parts of Joshua 24, and it says this, that then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and called a summit of the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of the people, and they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, "This is what the God of Israel says. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, they lived beyond the Euphrates and served other gods. But I took your ancestors, Sarah and Abraham, from beyond the river and led them through the entire region of Canaan. I made their descendants numerous." And then the story recounts parts of that narrative and culminates with this. Then Joshua said, "Now I call upon you to revere God completely and sincerely. Cast off the gods that your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve God. Now, if you're unwilling to serve God, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites who were in this land. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." And then the people answered, "Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did these great signs in our sight. God protected us all along the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And so we will serve the Lord, who is our God." But Joshua said to the people, "You will not be able to serve the Lord, for God is a holy and a jealous God. God will hold you accountable when you turn away. If you forsake the Lord and serve other gods, then God will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. And the people said to Joshua, no, we will serve the Lord. And Joshua said to the people, you're witnesses against yourselves that you are choosing to serve the Lord. And they said, we are witnesses. So he said, then put away the foreign gods that are among you and incline your hearts to the God of Israel. The people said to Joshua, we will serve and obey our God. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made statutes and ordinances for them at Shechem. And this is God's good news. It will be, I am sure of it, one of those I remember where I was when moments. Not because something awful happened this time, and not because it was the return of the Messiah or anything like that. It's really as simple as common decency took a breath. It shouldn't be that big of a deal, but still, I remember where I was. I was out back putting laundry on the rack to dry. I don't even mean that as a metaphor. I mean, I was literally hanging undershirts in the sun and breeze on an unseasonably warm November Saturday around 10:36 a.m. when I heard neighbors out front start yelling and whooping, and car horns started honking, and somebody turned up their music, and somebody else started to beat on a pot. And I ran inside and I said, they've called it. And we fired up the laptop, and indeed, they had called it. It was a great moment to cap off a week that felt like an eternity. A lot of you did a lot of work this season, and the nation voted out of office a narcissist whose sole commitment is to his own ego. Pat yourselves on the back for that. And it sure seems like the results will stand, no matter what legal spaghetti he throws at the wall, and that is worth celebrating. The eyes of the world were on Philadelphia, and Philadelphia came through. It was worth the dance party that broke out outside of the convention center on Friday as the counting kept going. It was worth the count every vote rally yesterday that really turned into the votes were counted and decency won rally. It was worth the march down Market Street. That was all very breathless. So since we're here together, let's take a deep breath. And another. And as many as we can, actually, because we're going to need to keep ourselves grounded and going. In her poem, The Art of Blessing the Day, Marge Piercy offers a stanza for this day. This is just one piece of that poem. This is the blessing for a political victory. Although I shall not forget that things work in increments and epicycles, and sometimes leaps that half the time fall back down. Let's not relinquish dancing while the music fits into our hips and bounces our heels. We must never forget pleasure is as real as pain. Yesterday was the day for celebrating. And today, I've heard this from several folks, actually. Today, our bodies feel lighter. I know mine does. It's good to savor this victory. We also need to commit to protect it and commit to protect vulnerable people, because this is what we can't lose sight of even as we celebrate. While it is true that the incumbent lost, and while it is true that his lies will not change the outcome, it also remains true that he is a symptom and not just a cause. The tumor is not the same thing as the carcinogen. More than 70 million people voted for him, and that doesn't just go away with a new administration. As my neighbor posted on Facebook in the early hours of this morning, I do know that the dangers I faced yesterday remain. So relish the victory and celebrate And let's also keep it in perspective. If there is one thing that the last 4 years should have convinced any of us, it is that white supremacy has not disappeared. It never disappeared. It has not gradually diminished with each successive generation. Each successive generation bears its traces and finds new ways to enact it. It's resilient and crafty and adaptive and tenacious. The old gods have not died, and they are death bringers. That was the call to Israel in the Bible reading from this morning, too. To recap that story very briefly, the Hebrew people had been led out from their enslavement in Egypt. They had wandered rootless and homeless for 2 generations and found themselves in violent conflict with the peoples of the land they moved through. This may also be a good plug for Bible study this coming Wednesday with the theme of Exodus and freedom is a constant struggle. That's the story arc that they're working through. The story where we have entered it today finds them settling the land and being presented with a choice. Serve the God who had brought them through their enslavement, who was with them in their wandering, or serve the gods of the people and the lands they had encountered along the way. The story says unequivocally, those gods might be enticing, but they are not life-giving. So the question for us, who are the seductive but deathly gods of this day? There is maybe the God of liberty uncoupled from the common good. Never shall I constrain my face within cloth, even while in public spaces in a pandemic. Give me liberty. There is the God of unending growth, who fashions economies based on the extraction of natural resources and the exploitation of labor. The God of security builds walls and fences that force people into the desert to die and builds prisons that need to feed on Black and brown bodies. And the God of whiteness ensures that the suffering brought by these other soul-eating deities falls disproportionately on the backs of communities of color. We can't forget about these, even in today's relief. Their call is alluring, but it leads to death. I don't mean that to be a bummer. I know you all have had more than enough stress for 1 week, for 1 season, and this is really, really a time to celebrate. Even beside the obvious reason, here are some victories that should make us jump up and down a little in our seats. Missouri, the state of Missouri, elected a Black woman to the House of Representatives for its very first time ever. A trans person won a state Senate race in Delaware, becoming the first trans senator in US history. Oklahoma will have its first non-binary Muslim state House representative. Richie Torres and Mondaire Jones became the first openly LGBTQ Black members of Congress. More Native Americans were elected to Congress this year than ever before. New Mexico became the first state to elect an all-female congressional delegation, and they are also women of color. In California, Prop 17 will restore voting rights to nearly 50,000 people who have completed their prison sentences but not been granted the franchise yet. Los Angeles voters moved to defund the police and support community alternatives. Florida voted to raise their minimum wage slowly, but it will get to $10 an hour next year with a plan to get it up to $15 an hour. And it is now 100% official that Nevaeh, Adrian, Elena, and Josiah are all Tices. This is progress. This is cause for celebration. This is move toward justice. We should seize the joy and let our mouths break with laughter and let our hips fill with music. It is a holy thing to dance in the streets while votes are counted. But we also must be clear-eyed and tell the full truth of our world. The deathly gods still gesture for tribute. A new administration will be installed and will hopefully make some positive changes. How could it not? The bar was set so low. But it won't change the fact that 70 million people voted for white supremacy. It won't change the systems that we all live inside and that let some prosper while others live in between death and life. It won't overthrow the old gods. So there is celebrating to do, and there is also work. And the Bible has a word for us in it all. Choose this day whom you will serve. Choose a God of mercy, of justice, of compassion, of solidarity, or choose the gods of deathliness. That's the choice. Choose this day, and then choose again tomorrow, and again the day after that. Amen.